Greetings, beloveds. This is Amy Karen Johnson, the Earth Channel, and today I do have a message from Gaia, but I would like to start a new series focusing more on astrology and relationships. And I'd like to begin by sharing with you some of my personal experiences. If you don't know this already, I just finished a 9-part series on chakras in human design. So human design is one of the forms of astrology that I have studied and that I practice. I also have studied and practiced Western astrology as well as sidereal and Vedic astrology. And there is so much to know about any one of these types of astrology. And what I have come to conclude is that whatever type of astrology you prefer, you will find what you are looking for. You will find certain truths. And astrology, I think, because it is so focused on the diverse number of ways that people can be, is more in touch with a lot of the truths out there than a lot of other modalities about how each person is unique and just universal truths for every person. So if I was to gauge any one type of astrology for being more or less accurate, I would gauge it on how specific it could be. And as far as prediction, which I'm not really into prediction, but I would say that the more a type or modality of astrology can specifically predict events, the more accurate I think it would be. And in that respect, I think that Vedic astrology has the edge. However, Vedic astrology has not necessarily, it's based on ancient texts which have a lot of wisdom, but it has not necessarily evolved that much with the times. And a lot of astrologers, if you speak to them about this specific issue, will admit that astrology is supposed to evolve with the times, and yet we are, according to Vedic astrology, in the Kali Yuga, a time of ignorance, basically, to put it bluntly and in the briefest way possible. Ignorance about the truth, universal truths, and the ways to use astrology to get the most accuracy. But it is evolving with the times, at least in one regard, that Western astrology is not, and that is by accounting for the precession of the equinoxes. It does adjust every year, every moment, with the precession of the equinoxes, which means that compared to tropical zodiacs, the sidereal zodiac, the sidereal is the one that Vedic astrology uses, is almost an entire sign different. And so if you're used to Western astrology, or even if you're used to human design and the astrology shown there, you might have a little bit of an identity crisis if you suddenly embark upon Vedic astrology. I do believe that Western astrology has a lot to offer. The houses, by and large, stay the same for each person, whether you're talking about Western or Vedic astrology. And so there's a lot of accuracy there. However, without the correct sign and without basically acknowledging the constellation and the stars that are in those signs, if you look at a star app, you will see that we have this stellium, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and then the Sun actually and Moon just left, but they were just in Capricorn, not Aquarius. So if you listen to Western astrology, they will tell you it's in Aquarius. However, if you look at the star app, you will see that they are in Capricorn. Or if you look in, a telescope, you will see that as well. So that's where I believe Vedic astrology still has the edge, is by accounting for, it's basically the wobble of the Earth's axis, which sounds like it's really unstable, but it only changes by about a degree every 70 some years. So I'm working on a way to reconcile the hexagrams as shown in human design with the sidereal zodiac. That aside, to get to relationships, the way that I have come to decide which type of astrology I resonate with, or which pieces and parts I'd like to try to pull together and incorporate, is by looking at my different charts and seeing which ones not only resonate with me. I do think Western astrology has a lot to say about energy in general that is usually accurate. However, if you're looking at actual prediction, it tends to be a little bit vague still. So Western astrology still resonates with me. However, I think there's more accuracy in Vedic and with the sidereal zodiac. And so looking at my own chart, I wish that more astrologers would share about their personal experiences and their lives, because I think that's one of the best ways to decide who you want to listen to and how much they might be able to assist you using astrology. I have Rahu. For you who know Western astrology, Rahu is the same as the north node of the moon, and there's also a south node of the moon called Ketu in Vedic astrology. These nodes of the moon are where, when the moon and sun get close to these nodes, you have an eclipse, because they sort of intersect at those points. So they're not actually physical heavenly bodies, they're more like points in space. The story behind Rahu and Ketu is that they were one being, a serpent, who was going after and distracting the gods so that they could go after this ambrosia, the elixir of immortality, life. And they succeeded briefly in distracting the gods, the devas, enough to get a hold of this ambrosia and drink some. But right after they had, that serpent, that being had imbibed the ambrosia, I'm blanking on the name of the god, Vishnu. I believe it was Vishnu threw his discus and beheaded this serpent with his discus, forming Rahu, which is the head, north node of the moon, and Ketu, which is the body, basically the south node of the moon. And so the significance really gets a lot more in depth when you listen to that story. Rahu, wherever that is in your chart, is going to be this place that just hungrily gobbles up, the subject matter of wherever that is in your chart, both the sign and the house. Ketu, on the other hand, is more detached. Oh, by the way, Rahu will never really be satisfied until, depending on who you listen to, Rahu matures, and that is around the age of 42, which I am 46 years old. Ketu is the headless body, and so it's very detached, not mental at all, doesn't really have an ego, doesn't have any attachment to the identity that you would associate with a face or a head. And it basically therefore represents what you have mastered in past lives. So the way that people usually behave, at least starting out in their earlier lives, around this Rahu and Ketu position in their chart, is that wherever Rahu is, they tend to be hungry for that subject matter, whatever that is, and sort of just try to gobble it up. You can even call it an addiction. In fact, it does indicate where there can be addictions in some cases. And depending on where it is, it can also indicate other bad things, but it also signifies where we are most immature and naive in our lives in this lifetime. Whereas K2 represents we've been there, done that. Doesn't necessarily mean we were 100% good at it, but we have certainly had a lot of experience at least. And sometimes people can fall back to that K2 realm, whatever it might be in your chart, when they're sort of burned by whatever it is that Rahu has them going after. For me, Rahu is in my 7th house. 7th house represents primarily relationships, specifically committed types of relationships like marriage, but it can also include business partnerships. K2, for me being in the 1st house then, because they're always opposite, means that in past lives I spent a lot of time alone and I enjoyed it. In some ways I was probably an ascetic, a monk, these types of folks who spend a lot of time in meditation, solitude, and isolation. And it may have been not always by choice, but usually if you've got K2 there, at least some of it was by choice at some point, whether it went well or not. So this is true for me. I, in my younger life, certainly felt, especially once I left home, that I really wanted to be in relationships all the time. I did not like to be alone. I was married fairly young, starting at the age of 23. Actually, it might have been 20. No, it was right before I turned 24. So yes, 23. And it only lasted 3 years. And I was just looking it up today and confirmed that when I got divorced after 3 years, it was when K2 was transiting my 7th house. So it was sort of giving me that opposite feeling with the transit, and it comes back around every 18 and a half years, I think it is. And that was 18 years ago now. I currently have K2 transiting my 7th house again. So K2 was sort of lending that detachment at that time, and I not only got divorced, but I had already been for a while before that really into more of a spiritual path, a path of detachment. After K2 left that 7th house transit, I did get married again within a couple of years and got divorced after that marriage had lasted for 5 years. After that, I still really wanted to be in relationships. I still thought that I might get married again, but by that time, I realized that I needed to learn something about relationships. I was extremely naive, thinking, how hard can it be to be married? All I have to do is find someone who likes me, right? And it'll work out. It doesn't matter, how compatible we are. I mean, what's compatibility? I can adjust to anyone. That's what I thought at that time. And both times when I got divorced, I had rude awakenings that not only was this other person not someone I wanted to be with anymore, but also I didn't like who I was around that person. So after my second divorce, I really dove into learning about relationships pretty much with any type of material I could get my hands on. And that was about a decade of really looking into relationships. I continued to date. I had a lot of very short relationships and a few that lasted over a year at least. My most recent one lasted, I guess you could say, at least 4 years. It's actually a little bit questionable as to whether it's completely done. I actually have not seen this person for almost a year. So I think we can say it's done, but COVID has been part of that too. and part of the reason that I haven't seen him. And I have tried to date other people. It hasn't really worked out, obviously, but I right now with K2 again transiting my 7th house, I really don't feel like bothering with relationships or even trying to date right now. Part of it might be COVID because it's just so difficult, but I know a lot of other people who have not only maintained relationships, but managed to date and meet new people during this time, as hard as it might be. Last year, before K2 started transiting my 7th house, met a few people on one sort of meet and greet each. I guess it was 3 different people. But there didn't seem to be any interest from at least 2 of them, sort of mutually, we didn't have any interest. And one of them, there might have been some interest, but we decided that not to move forward. So it's not to say that when K2 leaves my 7th house, which I think will be at the end of this year, that I won't again decide to try to be in relationships. But now that Rahu has matured, for me, I feel like I'm at least able to recognize more what a healthy relationship looks like. However, I'm not 100% sure that I know how to find someone else who's ready, willing, and able to have a healthy relationship, or what that would look like. I may still have some things to learn because there are some things you can only learn by being in the relationship and working that out together. I'd like to think that I certainly can, but right now, honestly, I don't really even feel like trying. And K2 is also, like with detachment, the spiritual, I mentioned that before, sort of interests. I do feel a large amount of universal love right now. If you've watched some of my other videos, I've always done a meditation, and I feel connected with the whole universe at the moment. I don't feel the need to have a relationship with one specific person right now. Like I said, that might change by the end of this transit, but that's how I feel right now. And it's really hard to make myself feel anything different. I mean, why would I want to? I'm just enjoying being alone right now. And, still connecting with people, but not in that committed relationship sort of way, or even with the intention of forming any kind of committed relationship at this time. I won't say, because anytime you say never, the universe might prove you wrong, but, if something did come up at this time, I wouldn't necessarily say no to it, but I don't feel motivated to give it a lot of energy to try to make it work. And in all of my relationships before, I put a lot of energy into trying to make it work. So this is a really new feeling for me. Okay, let's just take a couple of minutes to meditate and see what Gaia might have to share with us about relationships, and we'll see, perhaps astrology. So I'll invite you to take a few deep breaths with me. What I'm hearing Gaia wanting to share is that the beautiful thing about astrology is that it shows that diversity. She wants me to mention that one of the beautiful things about human design and that modality of astrology is that human design shows you the placement of the earth, whereas no other astrology typically does that, unless it's quite different from mainstream astrology. Human design also, she's urging me to share, speaks about neutrinos. Neutrinos come from everywhere. They're somewhat theoretical in describing them precisely at this time, but there is evidence that they do come from stars and planets, while at the same time they are able to move through matter, planets, our bodies, all the time and just keep going. But this is the energy that makes astrology what it is, makes it work. So not only are the stars and the planets emitting these neutrinos and sending them our way, but also the earth is too. And if you dive deeply enough into astrology, you will find every aspect there is out there that is possible within yourself. It may not be your dominant way of being, it may not be your primary way of being, but it is still in there, and that is because we are all part of Source. That is where we are all one. And in this physical realm, we are just dealing with the illusion of being separate beings and being separate from Source. And so that is the truth of astrology, that no matter which modality you look at, you will find that every aspect out there is within you. So if you have a charge or an issue with that aspect in someone else, look at it within yourself. It doesn't mean that there are not healthy ways of expressing that aspect and unhealthy ways at times. We are not meant to love ourselves at the expense of others. We are not meant to do harm to others. And yet we have to be who we are. Being who we truly, authentically, genuinely are is always healthy. And yet it does not mean we have to act in ways that hurt others. Just simply being is always a beautiful thing. And so when people act in ways that hurt others, they are acting from that belief in that illusion of separation from Source, separation from love, and separation from everyone else. Because the belief in that separation, the belief that we don't have love, is painful. And so sometimes people will try a lot of different things to make that pain go away. But that is why embracing diversity is so important. The more we can embrace diversity, the more we will find love everywhere, including within ourselves and also within others. And the more we embrace diversity, the less pain others will feel, because that illusion of separation will begin to slowly break down. And we can be a model for others of what oneness looks like. How can we be in oneness? That is where the healing lies. So that is what Mother Earth wants for all of us, is for us to be healed. For us to create and participate in an earth that embraces diversity, healing, and the healing of pain for everyone. That's what we're really all going for. That's what we really all want. We have different ways that we think we should achieve it, but if we choose to simply be, all of those shoulds, all of those ways that we act, and maybe we don't even realize we're hurting others through our actions. But the more we simply are, I am, the more that pain, the more that separation just dissolves. Deep breath. I want to let you know that I am feeling so much expansiveness and love for you all right now. You all are loved. I want you all to hear that from someone on this Valentine's Day. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste, beloveds. Like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.